Hello everyone and welcome to another Tri-tutors skills video. Today we will be discussing some tips regarding scene poetry. This is one of my favorite sections in the English syllabus, as with the right preparation you can do really well in this section in your exam. Your road to success starts before the exam. Don't leave this preparation until the last minute. As you are being taught your scene poetry for the year, keep these preparation tips in mind. Number 1. Get as much information about the poem as you can. During my high school career, I was very fortunate to have had some amazing English teachers who taught me all the information I needed to know for scene poetry. However, if your teacher does not provide you with enough information and analysis that you need in order to understand the poem, the internet is a fantastic resource. Do some research and compile as much information as possible about the poet and the poem that you are studying. The second preparation tip is also super important. It is no use if you have all your information, but one page is in a file, another page is in your bag, and the third page is stuck in your English book. Compile all the information, handouts from school, and your own notes onto one copy of the poem. If you have a ton of notes on each poem, I would recommend a flip file where you can allocate each poem to a separate folder. Another thing to remember is to write everything down. Write down any information your teacher gives you because you will not remember everything that he or she says. Write it down so you can adequately study for exams. Remember, you may be taught a poem in February and write an exam on it in November. So please write everything down so you don't forget. The third piece of advice I have for you is going to be explored a bit more later on in this video, so I'll just briefly mention it now. Know how to answer the questions. There is a skill and a technique involved. It will serve you well to know how to answer a poetry question. Otherwise, you may know the answer but not get the marks. The last preparation tip is to practice. I cannot stress this enough. There are past papers galore online for those grade 11s and matrics watching these videos. Another useful resource is your English textbook. The more you practice, the easier it will get. Okay, so now let's get on to the question of how to actually answer poetry questions. If you have completed all of your preparations and you have studied your poetry really well, these answering techniques will ensure that you will succeed in this section. Just a side note, there is a misconception that if a poem is a scene poem, you will have seen all the exam questions before in your study of the poem. This is not necessarily the case. You may be caught off guard by the question because you haven't analyzed that idea in relation to the said text. But because you have studied the poem and done your research, you will be able to quickly decipher the answer. Now, back to the answering techniques. I've decided to tackle two different questions with you today. The first question is a 2-mark question and the second one is a 4-mark question. The 2-mark question asks us to identify the alliteration in the poem. Now this is an easy question, but it is unfortunately a question that some students get wrong, purely based on their answering technique. Don't just write line 2. Make sure you quote the alliteration and tell the marker why it is alliteration. This way you are guaranteed to get the full 2 marks. Now for the 4-mark question. Is the figure of speech used in line 14 effective? This is such a common question in poetry, so it's important to know how to answer it. Just a quick side note, if they ask whether a figure of speech is effective, it usually is. We are going to break down the question into 4 pieces. This way, if we give an answer for each piece, we will get our 4 marks. Firstly, what is the figure of speech? It is a metaphor. 1 mark. Secondly, what does the metaphor do then? It effectively compares the untidy state of the room to a war zone, which is typically a site of chaos. That gives us 2 marks. Lastly is our linking sentence. The figure of speech is effective as it emphasizes the message the speaker is trying to relate. The room is extremely disorganized and chaotic, and that will give us our final mark. The next step you need to do is to write full sentences with these points and present your answer as a well-structured paragraph. So, let's summarize. Remember to look carefully at what the question is asking. Bring evidence in the form of a quote to make your answer credible. Answer every single part of the question. And lastly, for those long questions, structure your answer like a mini essay in a paragraph form. Give an introductory sentence, your body answer, and a linking sentence to conclude. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found these tips useful. Bye for now.